What would you do if the people humiliating you had the power to erase your past and enjoyed doing it? The laughter came first. Loud. Confident. Untouchable. A group of officers stood inside the hangar, pointing at a black cleaning lady as if she wasn't even there. "Let's humble her," Captain Bradley Thompson said, smiling. His tone carried something worse than cruelty. Authority. Kesha Williams kept her eyes on the floor. The same concrete she scrubbed every night. Humiliation here wasn't loud. It was routine. Thompson was a senator's son. Everyone knew it. Power ran in his family, and so did immunity. Around him, no one objected. No one questioned. And justice didn't need permission. It already had it. "At least today she'll learn where she belongs," he added. More laughter. Kesha's hands tightened around the broom handle. She didn't answer. Silence had kept her alive for 8 years. At 42, she had perfected invisibility. Head down. Movement small. No eye contact. That was how you survived a place built on hierarchy. But something in Thompson's voice crossed a line. Not the insult. The certainty. For a brief moment, the hangar disappeared. In its place, roaring engines at altitude. A cockpit. Instruments alive under her hands. A life buried, not lost. Kesha closed her eyes. Then opened them slowly. The calm on her face was mistaken for fear. It wasn't. It was control. "Sir, I need to finish cleaning the north sector," she said. Flat. Professional. Neutral. "Cleaning can wait," Thompson replied. "What can't wait is your lesson." He turned to the others. "Get the flight gear. Let's put her in the cockpit." The idea was simple. Humiliate her. Prove power. Entertain themselves. A flight suit was shoved into Kesha's hands. She accepted it without protest. As she pulled it on, her fingers moved with quiet precision. Adjusting straps. Securing buckles. No one noticed. Because they were too busy laughing. To realize the body remembers. The laughter didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder as Kesha walked toward the jet. Slow. Controlled. Every step watched. An F-16 waited on the tarmac, fueled and live. Not a prop. Not a joke. "Careful," Thompson called out, amused. "That machine costs more than your entire life." No one corrected him. Power doesn't like being questioned. Kesha climbed the ladder. Metal under her boots. Cold. Familiar. Inside the cockpit, the space closed around her like a memory she wasn't supposed to touch. The seat. The controls. The smell of fuel and metal. Her hands hovered for half a second. Then settled. Below, Thompson frowned. "Hey! Don't touch anything," he shouted. "That's not part of the game." Game. That's what humiliation becomes when authority is bored. A phone camera rose from the crowd. Then another. Someone laughed again. Kesha adjusted the helmet. Strapped it tight. Her breathing slowed. She wasn't deciding whether she could do this. That had never been the question. She was deciding whether to let them finish. Her fingers moved. Not fast. Certain. Switches. Checks. Sequence. Too precise to be accidental. One of the older mechanics stopped laughing. He leaned forward. Watched her hands. The engine responded. Not violently. Clean. Controlled. The sound cut through the hangar. Different from chaos. Disciplined. "Wait," someone muttered. "That's not random." Thompson's smile stiffened. "What are you doing up there?" he snapped. "Shut it down. Now." Kesha didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead. The instruments were alive. aligned, obedient. Power had pushed her into the cockpit. And now it was realizing something was wrong. Very wrong. The radio crackled. Static first. Then her voice. Calm. Clear. Trained. Control tower, this is Griffin 07. Requesting clearance to taxi. The hangar went silent. Phones lowered. Breaths held. Because that voice didn't belong to someone pretending. And everyone felt it. Silence slammed into the hangar. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Fear. Captain Bradley Thompson froze with the radio still in his hand. That wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. Who authorized that call sign? He snapped, forcing his voice upward. No one answered. Across the hangar, a gray-haired mechanic slowly straightened. His eyes were locked on the jet. That's not a civilian voice, he said quietly. That's trained. Inside the cockpit, Kesha didn't move. Griffin 07. The name echoed like a door reopening. The radio crackled again. Griffin 07, confirm identification. Kesha answered without hesitation. Captain Kesha Williams. Standing by. Captain. The word landed hard. Phone stopped recording. Hands lowered. Someone whispered her name like it wasn't allowed to be said. Thompson laughed, too loud. She's lying. Anyone can memorize a few words. But the tower didn't respond to him. Instead, there was a pause. Long enough to feel dangerous. Then a new voice cut through the static. Controlled. Senior. This is Colonel Harris. Every officer stiffened. Who put Griffin 07 in that cockpit? Thompson opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The colonel continued. Captain Williams, remain seated. Do not power down. Kesha closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Not relief. Preparation. The hangar shifted. Power changed direction. Someone had checked the records. Someone had found the truth. And whatever came next was no longer a joke. The colonel arrived fast. Too fast. Two black vehicles rolled into the hangar, lights off, engines still running. When Colonel Harris stepped out, conversation died instantly. He looked older than Kesha remembered. But his eyes were the same. Sharp. Assessing. Captain Williams, he said, approaching the jet. No hesitation. No confusion. Just certainty. Thompson snapped to attention. Sir, this is a misunderstanding. She. Harris raised a single finger. Thompson stopped mid-sentence. Harris climbed the ladder halfway, stopping at eye level with the cockpit. Do you know how many times I read your name in sealed reports? He asked Kesha quietly. Enough to know exactly how this should have gone. Kesha met his gaze. With due respect, sir, it went exactly how it always does. Harris exhaled slowly. Then he turned to the gathered officers. 8 years ago, Captain Williams was one of the most decorated fighter pilots in this division. Until command needed a failure that wouldn't ask questions. A ripple of shock ran through the hangar. She flew missions no one here was cleared to hear about, Harris continued. And when one went sideways, the blame landed where it was easiest. Thompson shook his head violently. That's not possible. We would have known. Harris looked at him. You would have known if you were taught to look. The colonel turned back to Kesha. Why didn't you say anything? She answered without emotion. Because no one was asking. And because silence was safer. Harris nodded. Not anymore. He faced the base. Effective immediately, Captain Kesha Williams is reinstated pending formal review. And every individual involved in today's demonstration will remain right here. Thompson's knees visibly weakened. Foster's phone slipped from his hand and hit the concrete. Harris's voice hardened. You thought humiliation was harmless. You thought power meant permission. He pointed toward the jet. That woman could have saved your life. And you used her as a joke. Kesha finally powered down the engine. The roar faded, leaving only breathing and shame behind. As she climbed down the ladder, the crowd parted instinctively. For the first time in 8 years, she was no longer invisible. And everyone felt it. Thompson tried to speak again. Sir, this is being blown out of proportion. It was just a joke. Team bonding. Colonel Harris turned slowly. You humiliated a decorated officer because of her skin color and her job title, he said. That's not a joke. That's a career-ending decision. Military police appeared at the edge of the hangar. Quiet. Efficient. Waiting. Harris continued. Captain Williams was grounded without due process. Her record was buried. Her silence was enforced. He looked directly at Thompson. And you benefited from that culture. Kesha stood off to the side, helmet under her arm. Her heart pounded, but her posture never broke. This was the moment she had imagined 1,000 times, and yet it felt unreal. A young lieutenant stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, is it true she flew combat missions? Harris answered without looking away from Thompson. More than most of you ever will. The hangar felt smaller now. Heavier. Harris turned back to Kesha. You never should have been here, mopping floors. She allowed herself one breath. I know, sir. The colonel's voice softened. And yet you stayed. Kesha nodded. I needed the truth to surface on its own. Harris studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, it finally did. Thompson was escorted away. His protests echoed, but no one listened. Foster followed, face pale, phone confiscated. As the doors closed behind them, the base exhaled. Mechanics approached Kesha, unsure, respectful. The gray-haired one spoke first. I knew it, he said. You never walked like the rest of us. She smiled faintly. Old habits. Harris straightened. Captain Williams, you're dismissed for now. Command will contact you within 48 hours. She saluted. He returned it. For the first time in 8 years, she walked out of the hangar not as a cleaner, but as a pilot reclaimed. News didn't break quietly. It detonated. By the next morning, videos had leaked, not of humiliation, but of exposure. Clips of Thompson's words. Audio of Harris's command. And a single frame of Kesha sitting calmly in the cockpit. The narrative flipped overnight. Headlines questioned how a decorated black pilot could vanish into janitorial work for nearly a decade. Former squad mates came forward. Quiet witnesses spoke. An internal review expanded into a full investigation. Kesha watched it all from her small apartment, the same place she had returned to every night after scrubbing floors. The uniform hanging in her closet no longer felt like a relic. It felt possible. Harris called her personally. They're reopening your case, he said. Not because they want to. Because they have to. She closed her eyes. Thank you, sir. He paused. I'm sorry it took this long. Days later, she stood before a review board. No theatrics. Just facts. Flight logs. Mission records. Suppressed evaluations. One by one, the lies unraveled. The board chair leaned forward. Captain Williams, why didn't you fight this 8 years ago? She answered steadily. Because the system wasn't listening. Today it is. Silence followed. Then nods. When the decision came, it was unanimous. Reinstatement. Public acknowledgement. Formal apology. The Air Force issued a statement calling her treatment a failure of leadership. Kesha read the words slowly. They didn't erase the years. But they changed the future. She returned to the base weeks later, not with a broom, but with flight clearance. Some people couldn't meet her eyes. Others saluted too eagerly. She didn't need either. As she walked toward the runway, helmet under her arm, she felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. Her first flight back wasn't ceremonial. No cameras. No applause. Just sky, engine, and muscle memory. The jet lifted cleanly, responding like it always had. For the first time in years, Kesha let herself breathe fully. Up there, above the noise and the politics, nothing had changed. Skill still mattered. Focus still mattered. Truth still mattered. Back on the ground, things were different. Mandatory diversity reviews began across multiple bases. Names surfaced. Patterns became undeniable. Careers quietly ended. Others stalled permanently. Thompson's record unraveled fast. Prior complaints. Favor trading. His resignation came without ceremony. Foster transferred out of state. His father retired early. Kesha didn't follow any of it closely. She was busy flying again. One afternoon, a young black cadet approached her outside the hangar. Nervous. Determined. "Ma'am," she said, "they told me your story. I just wanted to say, thank you." Kesha studied her for a moment. Then nodded. "Fly clean," she said. "And don't let anyone decide who you are." The cadet smiled like she'd been handed something fragile and powerful. That night, Kesha stood alone near the runway, watching lights fade into distance. 8 years had been taken from her. But not her identity. They had buried her quietly. They never expected her to take off again. Months later, Kesha received an invitation she hadn't asked for. A formal ceremony. Medals reinstated. Public recognition. She almost declined. Then she remembered the broom. The laughter. The silence. The auditorium was full. Brass polished. Speeches prepared. When her name was called, the room stood. She walked forward steady, unhurried. Not proud. Not angry. Just present. Colonel Harris pinned the medal himself. "Welcome back," he said softly. She nodded. "I never left." Applause followed, loud and long. Some people clapped out of respect. Others out of guilt. Neither mattered. What mattered was the record now restored. The truth now documented. Later, alone again, Kesha placed the medal in a drawer. Not hidden. Just not displayed. The next morning, she flew. Because her story was never about revenge. It was about dignity. And dignity, once reclaimed, doesn't need an audience. The story didn't fade the way scandals usually do. It stayed. Training manuals were updated. Case studies rewritten. Her name appeared where it should have been all along. New pilots learned about Griffin 07. Not as a myth. As a warning. A reminder of what happens when bias replaces judgment. Kesha became an instructor by choice. Not because she needed to prove anything. Because she understood something most leaders didn't. Talent survives silence. But systems don't improve unless someone breaks it. She taught cadets to trust procedures, but also to question power. To respect rank, but never worship it. Some lessons were technical. Others were unspoken. Every time a trainee hesitated before speaking, she noticed. And she listened. Years later, someone asked her if she regretted staying quiet for so long. She thought about it carefully. Then answered, no. Because when I spoke, it mattered. The base never looked at cleaning staff the same way again. Names were learned. Eye contact became normal. Small changes. Real ones. The kind that don't make headlines. On her office wall, there were no photos of medals. No framed apologies. Just one flight patch. Griffin 07. Sometimes, late in the evening, she would walk through the hangar alone. The same floor she once scrubbed now echoed with footsteps that belonged to her again. She didn't feel anger there anymore. Only clarity. They had tried to reduce her to a role they understood. She had waited until they forced her back into the one she owned. Not everyone who loses everything gets the chance to reclaim it. She knew that. That's why she never wasted it. And whenever a jet took off into the open sky, Kesha watched it with calm certainty. Some truths don't need to shout. They just need the right moment to fly.